You are listening to the Concierge Minister Podcast, a place to grow, learn, and be inspired as you discover God's purpose for your life. Here's your host, the pastor you've always wanted without the church, Dr. Kumar Dixon.
Well, welcome back, listener. I am glad that you are still hanging there with me, Kumar Dixon, your concierge minister. You know, in about a week or so, there's going to be millions and millions of people around the world wearing this gray ash on their forehead. And I'm sure you've seen it, and I'm sure you've never said anything to anyone because you're like, I know that's probably religious, but I don't want to get in trouble or get started with a conversation with a coworker. But I thought I would introduce you to Ash Wednesday. It's something that people around the world participate in. It's something I never grew up with and always thought was very weird and foreign until I started actually participating in it myself years later. So who to better help me understand but the Reverend Bryant Osvig. Welcome, Reverend.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Reverend Osvig is the university chaplain at American University, as well as the scholar in residence in the Department of Philosophy and Religion. Man, that's a mouth. Does that all go on your business card?
I am generally not title obsessed. So in general, when I meet people, I'm like, just call me Revo. I just, the rest of it is immaterial. And I will admit that, for me, the high peak of my career was recently when I walked into the on-campus cafe and the students cheered out as I came in, like, Revo, and then had my coffee ready for me without me ever having ordered. And so, as far as I'm concerned, that's all the title I need is the guy who drinks coffee.
That's the pinnacle. That's amazing.
I made it. I considered retiring immediately after that.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I will tell my listener that whenever I have some kind of serious theological question or trying to figure out kind of the history and tradition of Christianity, you tend to be the first person I call to ask questions about. So thanks for being available to answer some of our questions.
Well, I'm flattered that I give the appearance of knowing enough to be able to ask.
So let's dive into it. Ash Wednesday is coming up, and obviously it's, it has to do with the Easter tradition. Tell us just kind of an overview of what we need to know about Ash Wednesday.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And there is a long and sort of interesting history that goes with where we end up with Ash Wednesday. Sort of one of the interesting aspects of Ash Wednesday, I think, actually is the fact that on Ash Wednesday, the reading for the day in liturgical circles is when you fast, don't disfigure yourself. Don't tear up your clothes and throw ash on your head, but do so in a way, so that it's secret, so that, what God sees in secret is rewarded and not the public adulation for doing it. And this is the reading we do. And right after we do that reading, I'm like, all right, now come forward and get some of those ashes on your head, right?
Right. For the whole world to see.
For the whole world to see that, you're going to be doing something for the next 40 days. And, the first question everyone asks after they see someone with ashes is, oh, what are you giving up for Lent? Sort of that Lenten discipline question. So, the Ash Wednesday becomes related to an understanding of Lent in and of itself. The penitential act of putting ashes on oneself is really, sort of a long-standing tradition in the Jewish community, which very quickly became a part of the Christian community in the first century. Right? This was a penitential act. It was an act that you generally, you would frequently see, or not frequently, but you'd see in the Jewish communities for someone who committed an egregious act against the community, or someone who was in deep mourning for something that happened to them. So there's always been sort of an aspect of this ash act of piety that's been included in the Christian tradition from early on. And in that early first century, the majority of the individuals getting baptized were Christian converts.
Yeah.
And so one of the penitential acts that got associated with the converts was this sort of confessional penitential act of ashes and confession, and sort of a rejection of the life that they had before. And because the Christian community was this odd community coming out of the Jewish community and embracing the Gentiles around it, you had the Gentile community coming to make confession that they had worshiped idols and sacrificed to idols. And so where would place ash on themselves as a part of this. And the day for believers to be baptized, it seemed most appropriate for believers to be baptized. Well, the days, there was an early sort of Christian conversation of, is the better day to baptize new Christians on Epiphany Sunday, so the day that Jesus was baptized, which is probably one of the earlier holidays celebrated in the Christian community that wasn't Easter, was actually the Epiphany, the baptism of our Lord. Or should you do it on Easter when Christ is resurrected and you're being baptized into the promise of the resurrection? And so there was, some early first few centuries back and forth about which of these holidays is when new converts should, come into the community. And associated with that would be, these acts of contrition, this education in the faith, and an eventual full confession of who Christ was for the community members. And around this springs up, sort of these traditions of fasting. And at first it was, in the week leading up to Easter, as these penitentials are preparing themselves to be baptized, the week leading up to Easter, they would take on a fast. And you see this developing in one part of Christendom. At the same time,
is the fasting, the ash and kind of the mourning and kind of like looking within, can be, you can kind of see the line where it goes into Judaism, but is the fasting portion of that also representative of Judaism, or is this kind of a new tradition that's taking on within the early Christians?
There are strains of it in Judaism, but the asceticism that comes in early Christianity and sort of the denial of self for the benefit of aligning oneself with God, right? And let's be really clear. Early on in Christianity, there was this conversation about whether or not one could do stuff to earn God favor or not. Sort of the Arian Athanasius debate. Really, there's like an early sort of sense of like, asceticism is about aligning oneself with God and not necessarily turning God towards you. Okay. Or there's some of that plays into it as well. And certainly the Protestant traditions pick up that even more so later on. But yeah, there's strains of it in Judaism that gets associated really quickly with the asceticism of the early Christians. And some of that asceticism is there already culturally in the Greek communities around what we have with this denial of physical self as being the problem and sort of, moving into more heady self, aesthetic qualities of philosophies of the Greek culture. So you have this growing up in the community. At the same time, you have this like, okay, we need to prepare ourselves. We've got this week fast going on leading up to Easter. And it starts like Palm Sunday, Passion Sunday. So the Sunday before Easter was considered a feast day. So what would happen is you have a big feast that day, and then you fast all the way to Easter. On the Saturday before Easter, Holy Saturday, you'd be baptized. On Sunday morning, you'd celebrate with the community at the sunrise, and then go eat.
And is that why, like, especially I know a lot of Catholics who have a huge like Easter Sunday meal. It's because they've been fasting for the last day.
Yeah, well, I don't know that anyone's doing the full fast anymore. I mean, like, technically, like, yeah, I've had this conversation with our interfaith communities about the way, Christians don't fast as significantly as other communities. And I said, well, in real tradition Christian thought, like, actually, you have the Triduum, which is the 3 holy days. So it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Mm-hmm. And, you have a simple meal on Thursday. You fast all day on Friday, and then, simple meal or just water on Saturday, so you can, do this big feast on Sunday. Yeah. In Christian Orthodox communities, they have some significant fasting periods as well that include, non-consumption of food. And part of the non-consumption of food also was related to the first time you received the Eucharist. Like, you should fast, and you should be like, your stomach should be empty before you receive, this experience of grace.
That's beautiful.
For the first time, or, and in general, like, there's an expectation that people would fast before the Eucharist. But for the new convert, it would be like, the fast would be much more significant.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is growing up. There's another Christian tradition happening in the eastern part of the empire, which is in following in the footsteps of Jesus, like Jesus who got baptized on Epiphany, then went into a 40-day fast. A 40-day fast period begins to develop around Epiphany Sunday. So that's January and in through February. So we have these two different traditions happening simultaneous. And over time, these 40-day periods become intermixed. And the 40-day, there's so many biblical references to 40 days, so many other like early Christian like mythologies and sort of stories that rise up around the 40 days. I mean, including, let's like turn biblically. Jesus baptized, 40 days of fasting, temptation, starts ministry.
Yeah.
In the sort of in the Christian liturgical tradition, Jesus is resurrected on Easter, is around for 40 days. And then on the 50th day, we get the Spirit, right? And so like this sense of
Pentecost coming up.
Yeah, so we got these 40-day cycles. And so really, the importance of this 40-day cycle.
So
and this sort of ties it all together. So as we have fewer and fewer Christian adult converts, right? And we have more and more babies who are being baptized. And so this is in relationship to original sin. So once we have the concept of original sin, therefore the baby has to be baptized if it's going to heaven too. So we baptize babies. What we see is the Christian community begin to transition from this is an act in which the penitential who are coming into the community and those who've been removed from the community come back in to this is an act of the whole community to prepare ourselves for this feast. And with that, we see the merger of this 40-day Epiphany period begin to shift over into around Easter, if that makes sense.
It does. That's great.
That said, it's 40 days, not counting Sundays in some Christian Protestant communities, or 40 days, not counting Holy Week, which is a whole nother sort of period of time. So actually 46, 47.
Let me be Oprah and ask some of the questions everybody wants to know. Okay? Yeah. Because I know, like,
okay, I'm talking about this history stuff. That's all fine and good, but
yeah, let's move forward to 2,000 years ahead now. Why is it that like every Sunday, I think it's every Sunday that you can eat meat, but the other days you cannot eat meat?
Because no one can handle it. No, the idea is every Sunday is a celebration of Easter. So, the sense of every Sunday is supposed to be a feast day. Every Sunday is a celebration of Christ's resurrection. And even in the liturgical circles, like the readings of those Sundays of Lent are about baptism, ministry, and the hope of Christ, right? So every Sunday becomes a celebration of Easter. And it's tied up also with the sense of this question of, what is Sunday? Is it a Sabbath? No, it's the 8th day. It's the first day of the new creation. So therefore, like we as the people of God are called together to live in that sort of that joy of, we are part of the new creation on that 8th day. So yeah, every Sunday is a feast day, and therefore the fasting expectations are somewhat exempt.
Okay.
Or theoretically exempt. There's always, some individuals like, what do you mean you can't make it through Sundays?
Right. But I get it. I get it. I mean, if it's supposed to be a feast day, then it's the day of celebration that you get to kind of
absolutely
remember.
Now, on a pragmatic, practical basis, in the Middle Ages, if no one's eating meat for 40 days, you're destroying the farmers. And so there's always a conversation about economic sort of decision-making that plays into this. I've never been able to find validated research that says how much of that drove some of these decisions and how much didn't. But, that may be true. But in a theological basis, which is where we're grounded, right? How do we give theological, spiritual, pietistic explanation for this? And it really is like when we gather on Sunday, this is a celebration of the community gathered, and it should be a day of joy and celebration. And therefore our fasting in some ways is set aside once we've gathered at the table together.
So let me ask you some questions, just pragmatic questions and then questions out of curiosity. I'm dying to ask you about, Fat Tuesday, because I don't know why, but Reverend, every time I see the pictures and videos of like people out in, partying it up on Fat Tuesday, I am like offended. I am. I'm just like, do people not know like what they're doing? Like, this is so like sacrilegious. But is there tradition behind that, or how did that come about?
There is a tradition behind it, but it's like so many other traditions. It's I'm gonna borrow, like, I agree with you, sort of the decadence. That's not even the right word. Sort of.
I call it carnal.
The carnal attitudes towards Fat Tuesday are sort of problematic. The original Fat Tuesday purpose was, before the fast begins on Wednesday, to get all of the sugar and fat and, all of those sort of good things out of the house. And the way to do this is to have a massive party. And so, many communities will have like a pancake supper, like on Fat Tuesday. And the sense of this is, in like the old, like in the Middle Ages, like, you'd eat a lot of pancakes because pancakes are made with, sugar, they're made with lard, they're made with, fat. And so, not pancakes in the traditional sense that we think of them, but pancakes in the sense of, this is a quick cake in which I've taken all of the fats, oils, and sugars of the house and mixed them together to create this cake that we can now eat to celebrate.
So is that really the tradition? Why I see all of these churches having pancake festivals? Yeah,
the pancake festival is totally related with getting the fat out of the house.
That is so interesting.
But like so many other traditions and holidays, like the purpose of it has lost its link over time. And the Reformation, or like not just the Reformation, but sort of Protestantism, as it became sort of more and more splintered away from liturgical movements like this, lost that link of like, why do we do this? And so we don't have that relationship. As an interesting aside, in Eastern Orthodox churches, they still have a cheese Sunday, which is before Lent, in which they're supposed to eat all the cheese because they're not supposed to eat cheese during Lent. And I'm like, as someone who likes cheese, I think we should bring cheese Sunday back. I just think that this is brilliant.
I would probably bring back pepper jack cheese Sunday.
There you go.
I like that. So next week there's going to be, a line of students that are wanting you to put the ash on their forehead. Where do you get the ash from? Like where do, where does that come from? Is there like a secret Amazon.com, ash bucket that you buy, or what do you guys do? Is there any kind of like?
I like this pragmatic question. Steve, that was one of those things that no one taught you in seminary, and you had to go ask some other pastor, like, oh, wait, how does this happen? So there are two functional ways to get it. And I will give you the traditional one, and then the way everyone handles it. The traditional one goes like this. You have kept the palms from Palm Sunday. You have kept the palms from Palm Sunday, and they are burned. And that is more of a process than you might imagine, because palms have like a lot of fibers in them. So being able to actually get them well burned is a process. It is not as easy as it might sound. It took me a few years of ministry to figure out how to do it well. And so then they're burned. And the idea of this is the palms that we use to celebrate Jesus' entry on Palm Sunday, which was, you're the, Emmanuel with us, we're going to follow you. Yay, Jesus. End up becoming, on this day, on Ash Wednesday, a remembrance of how many times over the last year we have not actually made Jesus the King of our life, where we haven't actually been a follower of Jesus, where we've turned away and denied Jesus ourselves. And, that sense of this celebratory thing has become actually a mark of our shame now.
Wow.
And so they're burned, pulverized, and then you actually add some chrism or oil to them. If you add water, they actually become more like lye and can actually burn.
Okay.
That's an early lesson you learn in ministry.
First degree burn.
Yeah. So in general, that's what you do. You add a little oil because it allows the palm ash to have a little bit of substance to it. It's very sticky. I have books that have like palm ash thumbprints on them because they're the church people books I use for Palm Sunday. I have some vestments with palm prints on them. Now, that's the traditional way. The way that most people do it is like you can order it from a church supply company. You get a little, yeah, and you can always tell first timers because like it doesn't take much to like get a lot of people, but people get like a little self-conscious. So it's like one little tube, and I don't even have a good, not even like a small medicine.
Yeah.
Like that will probably, you could probably go years with like a small medicine capsule, and yet you'll have clergy like I was freaked out. And so I bought 10, and you walk into churches with like all of these vials of ash left over from decades of Ash Wednesday services. So that's it's supposed to be done and the way that everyone does it, So yeah, you can go to Amazon and go, I need some palm ash for.
That's awesome. Jeff Bezos will hook you up.
Jeff Bezos would be happy to take your liturgical money.
So Ash Wednesday comes, the pilgrims show up, and it's a very solemn occasion. What is the participant doing in their heart and preparing as they come in for that service?
Well, I don't know what they may be doing, but the sense of the moment really is really that question of how do you understand your Christian living to be reflected in your life, and how have you not been able to reflect that as truly as you might want to? Where have the missteps been along the way? Like what are the things that are holding you back, or what are the things that constrain you from living holy living into the love of God that surrounds you every day? So, for the individual who's coming into that moment, it really is that question of like, what is it that pulls me away from fully embracing the love of God that is available for me? How have I failed in reflecting that back out into the world, right? Because it's a both and. How have I embraced it, and embracing it, how am I reflecting it back out? So the penitent is coming into that season of, really, what is it that I need to do to be able to claim this name of Jesus that, I'm sort of making a statement about in some way as I gather in this space. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Is it true that they're not supposed to wipe off or wash the ash from their forehead?
There's no liturgical instruction on that one, actually.
Okay.
That's for the penitent to figure out what they want to do with the ash on their forehead. I always find it funny because on that day, like there's ash on my forehead, depending on what time the service is. And just inadvertently, you'll feel something drip on your forehead. So you're like, oh man, it's wiped away. But there's no, you don't have to leave it on your forehead. That you choose to is one thing. It's funny. What I find funny about Ash Wednesday is frequently a portion of the people who show up for services are those who saw someone else with ashes on their forehead and all of a sudden realize it's Ash Wednesday and they probably should do something.
Right.
Like this like overwhelming sense of guilt, like hits them like, oh, I need to do this.
Let's talk briefly about Lent, because it's 40 days of what? I mean, we tend to, especially we've kind of modernized it as it's 40 days of giving up something. And it's not even the idea of the act of sacrifice. It's really the act of like giving up Facebook for 40 days. So it's supposed to be 40 days of fasting, right? And one of the first things I tell people is a fast is not a diet. This is not a thing where I'm giving up something that needs to be given up. If Facebook is causing you problems, you should give up Facebook before you get to Lent. Lent isn't your opportunity to do it. Lent is supposed to be about something different. And fasting is supposed to be about something different. And that's often the confusion, right? Yeah.
So because of concerns about the way that fasting and have come into our common community and concerns about body imaging and stuff like that, we don't, we talk about spiritual disciplines. What are you taking on? What are you doing additional? Which in some ways is a fast of time. It's just we don't use that same language. But it's still a misunderstanding of a fasting. A fasting is supposed to be about coming to understand, know, and love God more. And this is done in three ways. First of all, when you give up something that you like, I'm going to pick on ice cream because I love ice cream. And as far as I'm concerned, it's proof of the existence of God. So when you give up ice cream, the first thing to know in giving it up is it was something that I enjoyed. And enjoying it, I realized that, God is a God of creation who gave joy and pleasure and wonderfulness around me. And I come to know God as a God of giving, right? The second element of it is in giving something up that gives me joy, I come to recognize in Christ what God gave up to communicate divine grace to me, right? Mm-hmm. So if I give up ice cream, like, okay, that's significant to me, but how much more for God to give up divine self in Christ?
Yeah.
And then the final thing is, we know that what we read consistently in the story of Jesus and in the communications of God throughout Scripture, in the Hebrew canon and otherwise, is that there's this sort of divine inclination towards those without. And so in giving up something that I love, I also come to move myself into solidarity with those who do not have. And in moving in solidarity with them, I discover compassion and empathy. I have the choice of not eating ice cream. They do not. So what does it mean for the people who do not have that choice, who do not get to eat it because they don't have the capacity or financial resources to do it? Mm-hmm. And in so doing, in moving to that solidarity, what is my responsibility for someone who is now recognizing that God loves me and gave me something wonderful, recognizing how much God gave up to talk to me? What is my, in coming to know God more, responsibility in reaching out and sort of meeting those needs and those responsibilities of others, my neighbors who surround me every day? So, the spiritual discipline of fasting is supposed to be about coming to love God more, not trying to make God love you more. And I think that's one of the confusions about spiritual disciplines in general. That, there's an assumption about overt or non-overt, that, there's something that we can do to bend the will of God, rather than recognizing that God already loves us perfectly as we are. The question is always, how can we love God more?
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful, quotable, and I'm going to take it as my own quote.
Oh, all right. Well, you do it.
You're gonna
although this is recorded, so
I don't care. I'm going to take credit for it. It's
you go for it.
Yeah, I love it. And so does that lead into kind of the almsgiving then?
That's the intention of it. So then individuals, like in giving it up and not spending money on it, I should have additional resources that I can then put into reaching out to someone else's need. This becomes moving into the solidarity aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
And I know some people who say every time I think about the thing I give up, it gives me an opportunity to pray, which I also reflect. I tell people, yeah, absolutely. But that's reflected in the thanking God for the wonder and beauty and, joyful things that God has surrounded you with. So it that's in the gratitude side, so gratitude, recognition, and solidarity become sort of that spot for all of this. But in giving something up, I should have additional resources in that solidarity. I can move out in empathy and do something about their need.
So 40 days come and go, and now we are at the glorious day of Easter.
Woohoo! We're eating ice cream again.
Yes, thank God.
Yay!
But is there anything? I have grown up in kind of the Protestant kind of liberal tradition where now Easter is like a big Easter pageant play at church, and there's fake Jesus who's rising with a smoke machine, and it's like it's awesome.
With the laser light show behind.
Yeah, the laser light show.
That's exactly what Jesus had. He came out of the laser light show.
That's right. The angels are hanging from the rafters of the church.
They're up there. That's why the women run away in fear.
Yeah. So what are we hoping people are going to kind of take from that Easter day?
Well, the hope is, right, if you've spent 40 days, 46 days, if you're doing Sundays or not, if you've taken the time, to be this deeply reflective, the intention for all of these exercises is to come out on the other side slightly changed, right?
Yeah.
In some ways, all of these sort of calendar journeys. Christmas is 12 days long. It's not a single day. It's a 12-day journey of sort of the infancy of Jesus. Advent is 4 Sundays prior to that. Like all of these are like in some ways a pilgrimage, and we're not supposed to end the pilgrimage the same person we started the pilgrimage as.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you come to Easter and you celebrate where you've come, right? And, what you've come from, and sometimes those changes are very subtle. I know people get disappointed. I gave up something significant. I expect to be so different and I don't feel different.
Yeah.
And the question is like, oh, maybe you need to spend some time and really, pray about whether or not, what did you learn? Did you learn anything? If the answer is no, then, think about what you weren't able to learn and why you weren't able to learn it. And in so doing, inadvertently learn something. But one would hope that, when we come to the conclusion of a pilgrimage, we're different. When we come to the end of a journey, we should be slightly different, more aware, wiser, whatever. And so that should be, the celebratory moment of Easter is like the journey has come in some ways, this calendar, this like repetitive seasonal journey has come to another conclusion. And what do I in celebration sort of reflect upon? In some ways, it's like birthdays. As I've gotten older, birthdays have become an opportunity to reflect about the past year. What has changed over my life over the past year? What am I taking with me? What am I leaving behind? And where do I hope to go? Right.
I like that. It's the reflective, side of helping you kind of really contemplate where you've been and where you want to go.
Yeah. And I think that, the celebration is one part of it. You celebrate, but then, sort of after the celebration, after you've eaten all that ice cream or chocolate or whatever it is else you gave up, red meat, bacon, whatever it is, you come out on the other side and you're like, okay, there's some moment of sort of hopefully self-reflective of like, okay, that was a journey, what have I really come to in that 40-day cycle? That's the beauty of these cycles is they create habits and patterns for this reflective engagement in life. Step out of the calendar or step both out and into the calendar in different ways to like build in these periods of definitive and deliberate sort of attention.
I was making a hospital visit yesterday in one of the hospitals in the city. And whenever I go, and if I have a few minutes extra, I always drop by the chapel out of curiosity to see what the chapel looks like, and then also to sit and pray for a few moments. And I walked over to the chapel and finished praying. And as I came outside, there was a plaque right outside on the wall. And it was behind kind of like a glass, frame. But inside the frame was kind of like a 12 by 12 pillow. And on the pillow, the gift donor had stitched a labyrinth onto the pillow. And it was just a small, representation of the journey that you're on. And I was just so moved by that, and as I'm listening to you talking about us taking that pilgrimage, I mean, that's really what we are. We're on that journey, trying to better reveal ourselves, but also become have a better understanding of who Christ the risen is in our life.
No, I first of all, I love the labyrinth metaphor in general. St. Augustine's the only thing to do is to walk it. The twists and turns, sometimes you're moving to the center, sometimes you're moving away. It feels, to your point, feels very much like life. And when you're walking it with other people simultaneously, sometimes we're walking together. Sometimes we're walking side to side, and sometimes we're walking away from one another. So much, Labyrinth also was a pilgrimage, right? Like the labyrinths were created for people who couldn't make pilgrimages to holy sites, so that the penitent could do a labyrinth. There's something about, these seasons of deep reflection and pilgrimage that invite us to really reflect on who we are, how we understand ourselves in relationship to others, and who God is for us. the language that I've come to know God is the Christian language. The salvific relationship I have is with Jesus. And that's the way I align myself in the truth I embrace and celebrate and name. And, these moments allow me, these moments, these calendar moments allow me, or the seasonal moments allow me the opportunity to really reflect on those things very deeply, right?
Yeah.
And those things haven't been static. Who Jesus was for me at 17 is not who Jesus is for me at 50. I was in a deep relationship with Jesus at 17, and I remain in a deep relationship with Jesus at 50. They're different. Just like my relationship with my parents has shifted and changed in that's a time period. And so, as humans, I think these opportunities to sort of move through this journey and to be told, in a religious context, this is time when you should really be thinking about, who you are, becoming.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that there are cycles in the religious calendar that kind of set you up for something that you may not naturally think about. And so it's there because you need it and you're not going to think about it, so.
And I think in general, it's how do we add a sacred element back into time, right?
Yes.
My students, we talk about, I have them read the creation story, the 7-day creation story. We talk about what's important in that story. And one of the things I name to them is look, one of the important things about this is 7 days. The week is 7 days. Every week is a celebration of these 7 days of creation. So all of a sudden, all of time becomes sacralized or sacred because today's the first day and I celebrate light. Today's the second day and I celebrate air, sort of moving through what does it look like when we surround time itself in a sacred way, rather than seeing it as a profane, just sort of march through existence.
Yeah, I love it. Rev O, thank you for joining me.
That's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Please come back.
Well, you know how to find me.
Thank you for always being prepared for any question I throw out to you.
Well, I lament the fact that that when you ask me a question, you're going to end up on a treatise on what happened for the first 2,000 years before you get around to sort of the answer to the ambiguous.
But can I tell you, you are truly the only person I know that can give me church history, just off the cuff. It's always amazing to me. It's truly amazing to me. So
I just play, I will admit my fascination is how did we get here?
Yeah.
These things don't spring whole cloth out of nowhere.
So. The stuff that you're able to retain, I'm oh my gosh, I love it. So
right.
Thank you, Rev O. Appreciate your time.
Of course. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Concierge Minister podcast. If you want to learn more about growing in your faith or looking for an online faith community for support while you're on your journey, please visit conciergeminister.com or send us an email at conciergeminister@gmail.com. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating. If you find this podcast helpful, please tell your friends about us. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, go and live your best life.